Welcome back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to crack open a real classic, Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yeah, this one's been around forever, right?
Oh, it's been a bestseller for decades.
Yeah.
I mean, you see it everywhere. And the thing is, the stuff he talks about, the insights into human nature, it's all still relevant today, just as much as it was way back when it was first published, like 1936.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So whether you've read it a million times or this is your first encounter with Carnegie, buckle up. We're going to uncover some secrets to, building those better relationships, figuring out how to influence people in a good way, and basically just becoming someone that people actually enjoy being around.
I think what's fascinating about this book, it's had this lasting appeal, right? I mean, the world's changed so much since Carnegie was writing, but the basics, those core principles about how people interact, well, those haven't really changed all that much.
Right. Exactly. That's why this deep dive, it's a perfect chance to take a fresh look at those principles and see how we can actually use them in our lives today. Because you're right, it's not some big complicated theory. It's full of practical advice, like stuff you can actually start doing right away.
Yeah.
Almost like a guidebook, for navigating those sometimes tricky relationships we have.
And he really got it. Carnegie understood that. At the heart of it, we all just want to feel important, appreciated. And when you can tap into that in other people, that's when you get genuine connection and you can really influence them in a positive way.
Okay, so let's dive into the first part of the book then. This is all about building those fundamental connections. And one of the most famous things Carnegie talks about is how important it is to be genuinely interested in other people. I know it sounds simple, but
it's not about fake flattery though, right? You're not trying to impress them.
No, not at all. It's a total shift in focus from you to them.
It is. It's really about putting your own ego aside, forgetting any preconceived ideas you have about them, and just really engaging with the person in front of you. Listen to their stories.
Really listen.
Yeah, and ask questions that make them think, try to see things from their point of view. That kind of sincere interest, that's what makes people feel truly seen and valued. And that's how you lay the foundation for a solid, lasting connection.
Yeah, there was this great anecdote we found about Benjamin Disraeli, the British Prime Minister.
Oh, yeah.
He was famous for being so charismatic and able to connect with anyone. He once said, talk to a man about himself and he will listen for hours. And it's funny, but it's so true. We all love it when someone makes us feel important.
It's true. It's true. It's like that saying, right? To be interesting, be interested. I mean, when you're genuinely interested in others, you become more engaging, more magnetic,
Yeah.
And that's the secret sauce for building strong, lasting relationships. Think about it. The people in your life who you feel really get you, who see you, who hear you, I bet they're the ones who are most interested in you as a person.
Absolutely. And Carnegie also talks a lot about remembering people's names. It might seem like a small thing, but it has a big impact on how you come across.
Oh, absolutely. Someone's name, it's so tied to their identity. When you remember it, you're acknowledging that. It's more than just being polite.
It's a sign of respect, right?
Yes, exactly. And I actually read about this study. It showed how when you hear your own name, it activates a specific pattern in the brain. It's connected to self-awareness and social recognition.
Really?
So yeah, when someone remembers your name, it kind of reinforces your sense of self. And it makes you feel valued.
It's almost subconscious, right?
Totally.
That's interesting. There are tons of stories about incredibly successful people who were amazing at remembering names. Like Andrew Carnegie, the steel magnate. Not related to Dale, by the way.
Right, right.
But this guy, he knew the names of thousands of people. And he used that to build trust, to influence decisions, to make these powerful partnerships.
And for him, it wasn't just some business tactic. It was a real expression of his interest in people. He understood how powerful it was to make someone feel seen and valued. And that's honestly part of what made him such a great leader, a great human being even.
That's a great point. So we've got be genuinely interested, remember names. But how do we actually engage with people in a way that builds that deeper connection? Carnegie says a key part of this is becoming a good listener.
And he doesn't just mean passively hearing what someone says, right? It's about active listening. You're really trying to understand them.
So paying attention to their words.
Yeah, their tone, even their body language.
It's the whole picture.
Yeah, and you ask questions to clarify. You reflect back what you've heard to make sure you're getting it right.
It takes effort, though, doesn't it?
Definitely. To actively listen like that, you've got to put aside your own thoughts, any distractions, and just tune in to the person talking.
You're creating that space where they feel heard and understood.
Yeah, exactly. And Carnegie says that's so important.
And there's a great example of this from Abraham Lincoln. During the Civil War, he'd actually invite an old friend over to the White House just to listen to him talk for hours about this huge decision, whether to free the slaves. Lincoln wasn't looking for advice. He didn't want the guy to solve his problem. He just needed someone to listen while he was processing everything.
That's such a powerful example of how listening can be therapeutic. Even if you don't offer solutions, you can be there for someone just by letting them talk, letting them feel heard. It's like being a safe harbor, when they're going through a storm.
I love that analogy. And it makes you think about those conversations you've had where you felt truly listened to. Those are the ones that stick with you.
Absolutely. They build trust.
Yeah.
They strengthen relationships. You walk away feeling more connected, like someone really gets you.
And that's the real power of active listening.
So we've been talking about the groundwork, right? Building those solid connections with people.
Okay, the foundation.
Exactly. But now let's get into some techniques. Like, how do we make those connections even stronger? And then how can we use those connections to really influence people in a positive way?
Okay, so this next part of the book, Carnegie spends a lot of time talking about how to win people over to your way of thinking.
Right. But it's not about being manipulative.
No.
Or
forcing people to do things.
no, not at all. It's about understanding what drives people, what motivates them.
Psychology of it.
Exactly. And then using that understanding to communicate your ideas in a way that resonates with them.
So one of his big points is that you got to show sincere appreciation. People, we all crave recognition. We want to feel validated. And when you take the time to actually acknowledge someone's efforts, their contributions, it makes them feel valued.
It does. It makes them feel appreciated. And that creates this positive connection, right?
Right, it does.
And then they're much more open to hearing what you have to say.
There was this study we found about praise in the workplace. And it showed that employees who got regular positive feedback, they were more engaged.
Makes sense.
They were more productive. And they were more likely to stick around.
Yeah. It's a no-brainer. I mean, it shows you how powerful a little bit of appreciation can be.
It really does. And it's not just about praising someone's work, right? It's about acknowledging their effort, their ideas, how they contribute to the team. It's about recognizing their worth as a human being.
Absolutely. And when you make people feel truly appreciated, that's when they're most likely to be open to your perspective. And they'll actually want to work with you to achieve those shared goals.
It's a win-win. Carnegie also talks a lot about the importance of focusing on the positive. It's easy to get caught up in what's wrong, what's not working.
It is, but he's saying we need to shift that, right?
Yeah. Look for the good in people, the good in situations.
It's not about ignoring problems or pretending everything's perfect.
Right.
But it's about choosing to focus on the positive, even when things are tough.
Yeah.
Finding those opportunities for growth, for improvement, instead of dwelling on negativity.
It can really change how you see things.
It can. It can change the whole dynamic of a relationship or even a situation.
There's this really inspiring story in the book about a guy named William Osler. He was a brilliant medical student.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Super smart. But he was crippled by self-doubt.
Yeah, lots of anxiety.
And his mentor, this guy, Dr. Palmer Howard, he saw Osler's potential. But he also saw how fear was holding him back. So one day, he gives Osler this advice that totally changes his life.
What was it?
He tells him to live in daytight compartment, to just focus on the present moment. Don't worry about the past. Don't worry about the future.
Just be present.
Exactly. And that shift, that change in perspective, it was huge for Osler. He learned to let go of his anxieties, to just focus on the task at hand. And he went on to become one of the most famous doctors of his time. He founded Johns Hopkins Hospital, revolutionized the whole field of medical education. It's amazing how focusing on the positive can literally change your life.
It really is inspiring.
Right. So let's talk about leadership for a minute, because Carnegie, he spends a big chunk of the book on how to be an effective leader. And he says, real leadership, it's not about wielding power. It's not about forcing people to do things.
It's not about being authoritarian.
No, it's about inspiring people, getting them excited to take action.
Exactly. It's about motivating people, not through fear or intimidation.
Right, right. He uses the example of General Robert E. Lee, the Confederate general in the Civil War.
Okay.
Lee was known for being really humble, had a lot of integrity, and he really respected his troops. And there was this one battle, Pickett's Charge. It was a disaster, lots of casualties. And Lee He took full responsibility.
Wow.
He didn't blame anyone else, didn't make excuses.
Yeah.
And that act of owning his mistake, even though it was hard, it earned him the respect and loyalty of his men.
So it's about like leading by example.
Totally. And that story, it shows how important humility is
Mm-hmm.
and accountability. You know, when you're willing to admit you messed up, to take responsibility, you build trust. People will follow someone who's honest, who's transparent, even when they screw up, way more than someone who's always trying to look perfect.
They'll respect you more, that's for sure.
Yeah. And it's not just about admitting your faults.
Right.
It's also about recognizing other people's contributions, giving them credit, empowering your team to succeed. When you create an environment where people feel valued, respected, that's when they're motivated to do their best.
They feel inspired.
Exactly. And Carnegie also makes this point about seeing things from the other person's perspective. Like if you're trying to persuade someone, you need to understand where they're coming from, what they need, what motivates them.
You need that empathy, right?
Yeah, that ability to step outside yourself, to see the world through their eyes.
I read this story about a Santa's guy who was trying to close a deal with this big corporation.
Oh, yeah.
He had been calling, sending proposals for months, getting nowhere.
Oh, hate when that happens.
Right. So finally, he realizes he needs a new approach. He starts researching the company, learning about their interests, their challenges. He wants to figure out how his product can actually help them.
He's doing his homework.
Yeah. And armed with that new understanding, he can totally tailor his pitch.
Yeah.
He focuses on the benefits that they care about, shows how his product can solve their specific problems. He closes the deal. It just goes to show how understanding the other person's perspective can make you so much more persuasive. It's about moving past your own agenda and really thinking about their needs and motivations.
It's a partnership.
It is. And this applies to everything, not just business. Convincing your friend to see a movie you want to see, or like working out a compromise with your partner.
Right.
Taking the time to understand their point of view can make all the difference.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Expressing appreciation, focusing on the positive, leading with inspiration, understanding different perspectives. Now, let's get to something that can be a bit tricky. How to handle disagreements and criticism and do it gracefully.
Yeah, I think this is a big one.
It is, because when someone criticizes us, our natural instinct is to get defensive or to fight back.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But Carnegie says, resist that urge.
Don't react right away.
Yeah. Instead, try to understand where they're coming from. Look for common ground. Acknowledge their feelings.
It's about de-escalating things.
Right. You want to create a space where you can actually have a productive conversation.
Exactly. And remember, even when you disagree with someone, there's an opportunity to learn something.
There's this incredible story in the book about Abraham Lincoln and General George Meade. After the Battle of Gettysburg, Lincoln was furious that Meade let the Confederate Army escape.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. He wrote this scathing letter, ripping into Meade for not doing more.
Ouch.
But then, he never sent it.
Really?
He realized that even though he was angry, even though he felt justified, publicly criticizing Meade wouldn't help.
It would have backfired, probably.
Exactly. It would have damaged morale and maybe even hurt the war effort.
So he was thinking about the bigger picture.
Yeah, he was. And it shows how important emotional intelligence is and self-control. Lincoln, he could have totally lost it.
Yeah.
But he chose to restrain himself.
He was a better man for it.
He was. And Carnegie's point is that criticizing people, it rarely leads to real change. It just makes people resentful, defensive, and then it's harder to resolve anything.
It makes things worse.
It does. He says, instead of criticizing, focus on praising. Encourage positive behavior. Show people what they're doing well, and they're way more likely to keep doing it. It's a much better motivator than constant criticism.
That makes sense.
It does, doesn't it? And this whole section, it's a good reminder that even in tough situations, there's a chance to show empathy, understanding, compassion. And when you respond to criticism with grace, with understanding, you can actually turn conflict into an opportunity to grow, to build a stronger connection.
That's a great takeaway.
So we've covered a lot of ground, right? We'll talk about connecting with people, building those relationships, how to influence people in a positive way. And now we're getting into a part of the book that I think is one of the toughest, but also one of the most important.
Yeah, this is where it gets real.
It does. This is about admitting when you're wrong and avoiding arguments.
Yeah. Those are two things that, for a lot of us, don't come naturally. Like, our ego just wants to be right all the time.
It does. It's hard to admit when you messed up.
It is. And arguments, sometimes it feels like you just can't help yourself, right?
Totally. But Carnegie, he makes this really compelling case for why those habits, those knee-jerk reactions, they actually end up hurting you in the long run. They hurt your relationships. They make it harder to achieve your goals.
It's about playing the long game, right? Not just winning the battle, but winning the war.
Exactly. There's this story he tells about John D. Rockefeller Jr. There was this huge labor strike at one of his companies.
Oh, yeah, I remember this one. Things were getting really tense.
Super tense. Negotiations were going nowhere. And Rockefeller, he does something totally unexpected. He goes to the site of the strike and meets with the workers face to face.
Wow. So he's not hiding behind like lawyers or spokespeople.
Well, he's right there with them. And instead of, defending the company or dismissing the workers' complaints, he does something completely different.
What does he do?
He admits that the company made mistakes. He acknowledges the struggles the workers are going through, and he shows empathy.
So he's being vulnerable.
He is. And that, combined with his promise to improve working conditions, it actually helps to calm things down.
Yeah.
And they're finally able to reach a resolution.
That's incredible. So admitting you're wrong, it can actually put you in a stronger position.
It can, because it disarms people. It shows that you're willing to learn, to grow, and it builds trust and respect.
Yeah.
And those are crucial for any kind of negotiation, for resolving any conflict.
Absolutely. So what about avoiding arguments? Because that one, it's tough.
It is tough. But Carnegie, he says, even when you win an argument, you often lose in the bigger scheme of things. Because arguments, they create resentment, they damage relationships. Even if you manage to convince the other person you're right, the relationship takes a hit.
The damage is done.
It is. It reminded me of this quote by Benjamin Franklin. He said, "He that has once done you an injury will more easily do a second than be reconciled to you."
Ouch.
Yeah. It just shows how arguments can really mess things up, even if you work out the original issue.
So what's the alternative?
Well, Carnegie says, instead of trying to win, try to find common ground. Look for ways to work together. Acknowledge the other person's perspective. Find things you agree on. And be willing to compromise. Because in the end, the relationship is more important than being right.
It's about keeping that bigger picture in mind.
It is. And this leads us to another really interesting idea from Carnegie, the art of arousing enthusiasm in others. He says that real influence, it doesn't come from forcing your ideas on people. It comes from inspiring them, from getting them excited about your vision.
So you're not pushing, you're pulling.
Exactly. Think about the leaders, the teachers, the speakers who have really impacted you, the ones who made a difference in your life.
The ones you remember.
Yeah. I bet they were the ones who were passionate about what they were talking about, and they could communicate that passion, make it contagious.
So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
It's both. We watched this video for our research. It was this young entrepreneur. He was pitching his business idea to these potential investors, and his passion for his product, it was just, you could feel it.
It was real.
It was. He was speaking with energy, conviction. You could tell he really believed in what he was doing.
And the investors, they bought it, right?
He did. And that's what won them over. That genuine enthusiasm. They saw that he wasn't just pitching a product, he was sharing a dream. And they wanted to be a part of it.
That's so powerful.
It is. It shows you how enthusiasm can transform things. It can turn a boring presentation into something exciting, turn a sales pitch into an invitation to join a movement. So we've explored all these amazing principles, from how to win friends and influence people, right? Becoming genuinely interested in others, expressing sincere appreciation, focusing on the positive, avoiding arguments, understanding different perspectives, and arousing enthusiasm in others.
It's a whole toolkit, basically, for navigating life, for connecting with people.
It is. It's a roadmap for better relationships, for achieving your goals. As we wrap up our deep dive, I want to hear from you. What resonated with you? What's one principle you can start using today? Because even small changes in how we interact with others, they can have a big impact. They can lead to stronger relationships, a more positive life, a more fulfilling life. So go out there, put these principles into practice, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.